Hello, everybody. I'm David Serpa.
And I'm Vincent Romo.
Welcome to another episode of the New Founders Movement. Today, we're going to talk about these different types of revolutions and why revolutions are fought. But we're going to start with the housing revolution and all of this new development that's happening, all these new opportunities that our generation is going to have an opportunity to actually participate in the American dream if we're smart about it, if we deregulate it, if we get power back to the people.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people will say, oh, the housing, it's such a problem, we need to build. Well, yeah, we need to let the industry take that over, get government out of the way, and let people figure it out like we did after World War II when we had the greatest housing boom this country has ever seen.
And and what people talked about for a long time was my grandpa built this house. Yeah. My grandpa built this house. I want to get back to our generation building houses again, us getting involved in building our version of it, because that's how we get debt free. We'll talk about that here in a little while. We're going to talk about water and energy, the way that we manage it or don't manage it here as a state. We're going to talk about the history of money and the gold standard and sort of the history of the dollar and where we are now. And then we're going to wrap up by talking about different types of revolutions as we're heading into a very revolutionary time right now.
Yeah, and water has always been an issue in California, but a lot of these issues we've already fixed at the turn of the 20th century, and then we kind of had a little bit of a social amnesia and a governmental amnesia as well. And we have fallen back into letting the government dictate just about everything when it's we, the people, who should be in control of the valuable resources that our state has.
And so we have a huge opportunity here, and let's kick this off with housing. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got such a cool thing happening right now in that, on a federal level, President Trump is talking about building on public land. And when people hear that, they freak out and they start thinking we're going to talk about building on, Yosemite or, building on a lot of these, beautiful national parks. That's not the case. In fact, California is absolutely humongous, and people don't realize how big of a state that we live in.
We live in a massive state, and one of the ways that the West was built was the sale of Western lands. When you talk about after the War of 1812, the way the American South was extended was the sale of lands, and it made our federal government quite wealthy, and it can do the same thing for our state government if we let it happen.
Same thing with California. People were expanding, they were building, they were developing. They had opportunities to get large plots of public land and build farms and build housing and build cities. And we don't build anymore because we've bought this stupid 1990s narrative of like the world is overpopulated. Like, we all watched a little bit too much Captain Planet. We ran back Fern Gully a few too many times. And now we just think that, all these majestic creatures are going to have their homes destroyed anytime that we put a shovel into the earth.
Yeah, or how about we all just pack into Santa Monica?
Correct.
And then when there's a fire, we're all cooked.
Let's all just build vertically, indefinitely forever. Let's just build straight up so that we never expand outward ever again. How disappointed were our forefathers be?
That's a great idea with earthquakes too, right?
Yeah, let's just build straight up like a bunch of idiots. And so the thing is when we look at this, 48 million acres, I want to quantify that for people for a moment. The city of Sacramento is a 60,000 acre city. And in that 60,000 acres, there's room for 220,000 homes. The city of San Francisco is significantly smaller. It's a 30,000 acre city. And in that 30,000 acres, there's room for 400,000 homes. And so the thing is we could build 5 new cities, and I have this all plotted out for exactly where they would be, how we would build them, in the water-rich areas that we would build them in. But we could build 5 new cities, all the size of Sacramento, 60,000 acres apiece, which would total 300,000 acres, and we would still have 47,700,000 public acres in the state of California.
We have tons of acreage, and here's the thing too. They make us believe in this scarcity narrative, right?
Correct.
Where we don't have any water, we have a drought, and then we have, what are they called, the storms or whatever that got. We don't have any oil. We're one of the most oil-rich places in the world.
Yeah, we need to ban natural gas and natural gas stoves, and we've got some of the largest deposits of natural gas in the world. And so all of this scarcity has been enforced on us. One of the things that people ask me, when I talked about building 5 new cities in the comments, they say, "Where's the water going to come from, idiot?" And I'm like, where's the water going to come from? Well, so we have about 5 trillion gallons of water that spills out into the coast
Right
every
into the
year.
ocean.
We don't retain 80% of our rainfall. It just is wasted. It's lost.
Even though we voted on that.
Even though we voted on it again, and we voted on billions of dollars of water infrastructure, I think $8 billion of water infrastructure, and it wasn't fixed. You know, things like the Stites Reservoir, the Stites Dam. There's so much opportunity to capture this 5 trillion gallons while it's spilling out the sea that people also get irritated when I talk about things like desalination, because they say, well, we're water rich. We're just not managing our water. I agree with you. Right now, we are water rich, but a lot of that depends on us being downriver of waterways that are drying up because they continue to build housing in the desert. And so all of this housing is going to need water and it's going to need energy. And I look at us with our 800-mile long coastline and our ability to build desalination plants and funnel fresh water inland. And we could have an extraordinarily profitable water business here in California, the same way that Israel has an extraordinarily profitable water business that they started in 2015, that now they sell water to their neighbors. And sometimes they're enemies. Water ends up keeping the peace. So we could sell water to our landlocked neighbors where they're not going to stop building housing in places like Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, at a premium. There is an initial infrastructure cost, and the initial infrastructure cost is about $2 billion per desalination plant.
Which is pennies, quite honestly. When
It's like what we sent Ukraine on Tuesday.
Well, when you talk about like what they've spent on the bullet train to nowhere, right?
Without results.
But this is all part of the fear narrative. If I can make you afraid to make a change, you're just going to continue to vote for me. You're going to continue to let me dictate how you should live. And then I'm going to raise more revenue, and I'm going to go on TV and say I'm raising more revenue. And you know what that means? That means taxes.
Yeah.
In whatever form that comes in.
And what I look at is when you're looking at government as a business, I look at creating revenue streams. Instead of taking more tax revenue from people, I look at getting government involved in things that government should be involved in so that the rest of the private sector can make rain. Things like water and energy. If government just got involved in water and energy instead of subsidizing water and energy, then we could be in an abundant place where we're selling it. Instead, what they want to do is they want to push the burden onto the consumer, which is you, the taxpayer, you, the public. You're already subsidizing wind and solar. You have to pay for it in the development, in the subsidization. You have to pay for it in the bailout if it fails. You have to pay for it in your monthly cost, but you never get to reap the reward of having invested in the energy and in the water. And so that's what I look at
and you pay,
as an opportunity.
You're also going to pay if they make a mistake.
Correct.
So if one of these companies makes a mistake and there's a massive fire, you pay for that.
Oh, sure. Look at PG&E, for example. PG&E was, trying to cut corners and whatnot. And how many fires are they responsible for? And let's just talk about what they pled guilty to. 85 counts of manslaughter, PG&E. And what happened was we paid for their representation. We paid for their bailout. And then we also, the public, the people that lost, 85 members of their families, 85 families that have been affected by this are then compensated with PG&E stock. It's heinous. It's criminal. But when you follow the money and you look at, there was a 6-part series that was done by one of these news organizations in California about Gavin Newsom and PG&E. And when you follow the money, it's very cyclical.
And then you go and look at the history books. And I always go back to the history books. We fixed these problems in the early 20th century and we let it get back into the hands of, people always say like, oh, you believe in public utilities and public transportation and public this and public that. Well, there's a reason for that because at the early part of the 20th century, there was these same concerns that we're dealing with now. It's like the consumers footing the burden of these companies' profit line, whereas they shifted that back into private utilities or public utilities, and then they sold it back into private hands. Same with the water rights in the Central Valley.
Brother, talk to me.
I mean, you can go on and on in terms of oil, in terms of natural gas, in terms of all this, and we are subsidizing it, and then we're paying a premium for it to come to us, and then we sell it outward and buy oil from other places.
And so the opposite is, if you privatize everything, you end up with a grid like Texas, which is on the edge of failure and on the edge of collapse, where people end up dying every year because they lose power. That seems stupid to me. But when you look at what we've done in America, is in 1992 and 1994, there was a massive privatization push of everything, of the people's resources, of things like
Except education.
yeah, and we could talk about that too. But like you look at uranium, for example, we don't even enrich our uranium here. 70% of our uranium is enriched in China and Russia, and it's because we subsidized the uranium industry massively. They kept shutting down nuclear power facilities like we saw in San Onofre and like they're attempting to do in Diablo Canyon. And what happened to our bills during that time? They skyrocketed. So in the 1960s, in the early 1970s, the United States built 60 nuclear power facilities. And then all of a sudden, everybody gets scared because of a movie and we stop building nuclear power facilities.
Unless it's Google. If Google wants it for to power their AI, so they can make more billions of dollars.
Correct.
And that's the whole narrative with the tax the rich and all of this. It's like, well, it's allocated in the wrong area, because the people who are actually burdening the bills for all this is actually the consumer.
Well, you end up with these super centers. You got a super center that Elon Musk owns in Texas. You've got a super center that I think is Palantir out in Tennessee. You've got all these super centers, and they're starting to be built outside of California, and they're being privatized. And is that really what you want? You want nuclear energy privatized? That seems crazy to me, because what's going to happen is they're going to end up being controlled by these massive tech companies, which are going to use our uranium for their powering their artificial intelligence, which takes an incredible amount of power. I would rather the public invest in it, and then we sell power to these companies, and we make these companies possible on a decentralized micronuclear grid.
Yeah, because when you're talking about job growth in California, most of the job growth in California is not in the private sector. Most of it's in the public sector, which means that is being put onto the backs of the citizens.
Correct.
So we need to start either figuring out if we're going to go full public or full private, because right now we are paying the burden of both. And
I think that there's a balance, right? So I think that
of course,
with nuclear energy and whatnot, that people can always explore ulterior forms of energy, ulterior forms of creating water and whatnot, but that these things are abundant. And so, people say, well, nuclear energy is not safe. Well, all of our aircraft carriers, all of our submarines are all powered on nuclear energy. They all desalinize their water, but it's incredibly effective. It's incredibly efficient. It's incredibly affordable. It's the front end investment that makes the back end dividend possible.
I guess the thing is with the privatization, I'm not against the privatization. What I am against is privatization and then a monopoly on top of it.
Correct.
So you can't go to another power provider. You can't go to another water provider. If it's a private company, it's
ultimately
privatized.
what you end up having is you end up having private companies being developed with public dollars.
Right.
And I think that's where everyone is kind of getting tired of it, is like, why am I subsidizing this industry $30 billion, $20 billion, $50 billion, and we're never getting an ROI? And so California is set up in a way that we could be plentiful, we could be bountiful, but some of this is going to require government doing the things that it should be involved in, which I think for a big part of this housing initiative, getting water and power to property lines. Just get water and power to property lines, and then allow Californians to do the rest. Because I actually think that this housing revolution that we're coming into, it's going to change everything. Because for the first time in history, you can, for $15,000, buy housing in a box from several different companies.
It's not the first time. Sears used to be able to buy your house out of the Sears catalog.
That's a great point.
So we've already done all of these things.
That's a great point.
That's what, for me as a historian, it's so frustrating when people are talking about like, well, how are you going to fix this? And it's like, well,
we did it before.
We already did it.
Yeah, a lot of these craftsman style homes, you're absolutely right. A lot of
And
these
they're beautiful.
were shipped in a catalog, and it's becoming more and more affordable. I love my host being a historian and a professor, because I like being corrected. I'm like, because you're absolutely right. It did happen before.
Yeah, it's great.
Now what's happening is you're having Amazon, you're having Tesla, you're having Walmart, and also you're having a lot of Chinese companies that are shipping entire housing units that are, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom units, 1,000 square foot, 600 square foot, where you can buy a plot of land for $15,000, $30,000. You could have a housing unit shipped out, whether it is a container unit where you buy it for $2,000 and you refab it, or it is a housing unit that's shipped from Tesla or Amazon or Walmart, or it is a barn that you're putting up and you're creating insulation and whatnot.
Pre-permitted, ready to go, pour the slab, rock out. And here's the thing
right.
too, the government in California is so intent, whether it's city council or whatever, they're so intent on increasing revenue. They go on social media and talk about increasing revenue like it's not tax dollars. But you want to increase revenue? How about you build a whole new city?
Yeah, 100%. And the 5 new cities, and just to go over them real quick, the 5 new cities, they go like this. There's the city of Alice, which would create a lot of homesteads and opportunities for people to own ranches and get into ranching without leaving California. Up just outside of Shasta County and Trinidad, there's a huge opportunity, lots of water there. So that's Alice. The next one is the city of Thomas, which would be in the north eastern part of the greater valley, where there's plenty of water for agriculture. It's right next to a massive agriculture layout where we could get people involved in building family farms, mid-level farms, strengthen that USDA loan for what it was actually intended for, which is to get individuals into building small to mid-level farming. The city of Abraham, which would be a city that's, recently there was a city that was hit due to the tsunami. We could go in there, we could build, redevelop, build it up, new structure, new infrastructure. It would be called Abraham, and it would be a new, beautiful city along the Forgotten Coast. The 4th city is the city of Frederick, which would be about 30 miles outside of Santa Barbara. There is a native tribe that wants development there. The city of Santa Barbara wants development. And so there's a huge opportunity to create a whole new Southern California beach town right outside of Santa Barbara. That would be absolutely beautiful. And then the 5th one is in Sonoma County. There is currently a decommissioned naval base called, I believe it's called Skaggs. And Skaggs was decommissioned. There's this beautiful area in the San Pablo Bay. For those of you that don't know, there's the San Francisco Bay. Right above that is the San Pablo Bay. And I would love to build a beautiful city that's built up. Think of it like Venice, Italy meets Dubai, but in the San Pablo Bay in the Bay Area. And so that would create a lot of opportunities for that tech infrastructure, a lot of those walkable cities and whatnot to be created in one city, but still have the other 80% of cities where freedom is allowed to reign supreme and deregulation and opportunities for people to create their own version of the American dream while we show people what's possible with the future in this city that I call Solomon, that is in the San Pablo Bay. Then it would create a 4-city area right over the bay where we could start investing in vertical infrastructure, the VertiSpace, drone delivery, vertiports, vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. And it would go Sonoma, Solomon, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, which all have airports.
And here's the thing too, you're not just talking about real estate, because David's a real estate guy, I'm an academic, and I go, every one of those communities is going to need a community college. You're talking about expansion of the UC system in a place that, these new cities where agriculture is a big thing, the UC system would expand in there, the Cal State system would expand in there, and now you're talking about all different types of industries who all are flowering due to the building of new cities. And that's already happened in California. We just have to get out of the way, not we, the citizens, the government has to get out of the way and allow people to plant the seeds and then let these things flourish, and they will flourish. Like, there's no doubt. There are people throughout this country who would love nothing more than to live in California and maybe take a 2-hour drive to go to the beach.
Yeah, correct. Or to live in a brand new, a 10-acre, 20-acre ranch, or to live in a new city along the Forgotten Coast, some of the most beautiful real estate on God's green earth, a new beach town, to create their own family farm in the Central Valley. These things are possible for us, but we have been told that the American dream was for everybody else and not for us. We've been told that we don't believe in home ownership for you. We believe in home loans for you. We believe in interest payments for you. We believe in taxes for you. We believe in home ownership for us, not you, not you young people. But the opportunity is shifting. And in the shift, there are gifts. And I want to make sure that the gifts go to the people to create these opportunities for us, not to overinflate an asset. Because if you have an overinflated asset that's $800,000 with a 2% tax rate, that's $16,000 in annual taxes. You look at the interest rate on that, would be astronomical. Versus if you're able to buy a piece of land for $30,000, and let's say you decide to get a larger, house that you're going to build yourself, and you buy it for $30,000. Well, all of a sudden you're looking at $60,000.
Right.
Well, a 2% tax rate on a $60,000 home is, it's so low. I almost have trouble. Was it $1,200
a year?
Yeah, or two. Geez, why is my brain not working?
3% on 60,000?
It's almost too small. Yeah, 2% on $100,000. It's $1,800. So you look at that kind of stuff, and there's so many opportunities for us to get out of debt. To have financial freedom. But freedom is financial freedom, but we haven't realized it because we've never been taught about finances. We've never been taught about taxes. So when you get that mortgage payment and all of a sudden 1/3 of your mortgage payment is going to interest, 1/3 of your mortgage payment is going to taxes, and only 1/3 of your mortgage payment is actually going to the principal.
How about we give the Hollywood a $50 billion tax cut though?
Yeah,
that's the problem.
And
right?
so the thing is, and we could talk about that too, but I also have experience in the Hollywood and film and television. I worked in that industry for 5 years. And the thing is, a lot of these tax, cuts or whatnot are actually just them not having to pay as much in taxes.
Right.
Because if they're spending $50 billion in your market and, letting them to keep more of their own money, which I'm a big fan of.
I'm kind
anyway.
of making a joke of that other guy running for governor. All he's talking about is Hollywood. That's like his entire platform.
Yeah.
But here's the deal.
Yeah, like you would think that Hollywood makes up like 1% of our GDP.
That's like everything. Yeah. But here's the thing: we can't even imagine what those cities would turn into if we let people run away with their creativity. When the age of AI. In the age of like the family looking to maybe move, something exciting, something like the gold rush. Like when you talk about how California became what it became was due to these rushes, the gold rush, the health rush, the citrus rush that moved people into these areas. And when these areas developed, they turned into their own thing. Even the manufacturing rush into Los Angeles, in the early 20th century, that became aviation, that became war production,
Correct.
that became...
There's so many opportunities when you create financial freedom for innovation to follow suit. Because if all of a sudden we had 5 new cities that had 500,000 people each, well, now you're looking at, 2.5 million people? 2.5 million people that are going to be debt-free within a few years?
Well, and how did Hollywood become Hollywood? Well, the open land.
Yeah, and the overregulation from the federal government. And so they, in order to get
the advertisers, the overregulation by the advertisers, right?
Correct.
And so
they fled out to LA to get away from the 3,000 miles away from that regulation and have more freedom.
Warm weather, open land. And that's what we
Decentralization.
have in our state-owned lands that we can give back to the people and create these whole new economies out of basically sand.
Correct. And again, out of the 48 million acres, you still have 47,700,000 acres of public land. And that's if you build 5 new cities and you help 2.5 million people essentially to get out of debt because they have a manageable mortgage payment. And maybe they don't even need to have a mortgage payment if you're looking at something like that. There's different ways that you can carry debt. There are different ways that you can get loans without a bank. We can talk about that. But in order to do that, what you need to do is you need to test the whole banking industry. And what you have in the banking industry is you have a globalist agenda where they want to centralize wealth and power and resources, and then they want to lease you your life. A 20% interest rate on your car, 20% interest rate on your credit cards, 20% interest rate on your student loan payments, 7% interest rate on your house. And all of a sudden you look at all this different stuff and all of these interest rates, and you look at a lot of the Abrahamic faiths, which build up, our country. In Christianity, Judaism, in Islam, interest is looked down on as usury. It's making money off of money instead of trying to get debt free. And so what's happened is any society throughout history that has tried to get debt free has been squashed by a globalist force. That's not hyperbole.
Here's the problem with just about everything that's going on, not only at the state level, but at the federal level. It's centralization. Centralization is so bad.
Correct.
You're basically creating monopolies that people can't get out from under. Even running for office, David, like if that becomes even more centralized than it is, there's no such thing as a grassroots candidate.
Correct.
Because they can't get the money to fund themselves.
There was a candidate that said, or once there was this big high-powered Democrat, and he said, you could pick whoever you want in the election just as long as I get to choose the candidates.
Right.
And that's essentially what we've ended up having. So what you have is you have a lot of the globalist agenda, a lot of these oligarchs, a lot of this old money that they want to control assets, and they want to control power, they want to control resources, and they want to control labor. And those are big elements. And so
It's called colonization.
it's called colonization. And when I tell people, I tell them, hey, listen, you are not free. And in fact, I went around and I talked to high school students, and I said, you know, what is it that if you were going to take over a country, what would you do? Well, I'd take their resources, I'd take their media, I'd take their education system, I'd incarcerate their population, I'd control their economics, you know, I'd morally and spiritually bankrupt them. And I say, who does that sound like? Does that sound like us? I could make it impossible for them to be able to feed themselves. And so you have these different countries throughout history that have stepped up to contest the global powers. People look at Haiti, and I've heard Haiti get called a shithole country. Haiti was a slave rebellion. It was a group of people who tried to liberate themselves from the French and then were forced by the globalists at the point of a gun to pay reparations to France, backed up by the United States government. In order to have their freedom, they had to pay reparations to France. You look at Libya. You look at and a lot of people look at these. Every country has their problems, but Libya was a very rich country. Well, they pulled a lot of people out of poverty.
And let's not discount that they have problems. Every country
Has problems, but what did they do that ultimately ended up seeing them to the end? They tested the dollar. They created the dinar. And the American public was investing in the dinar because the dinar was a gold-backed currency. And for a while, the dollar was a gold-backed currency. Not historically, we're not built on a gold-backed dollar, but that happened during Bretton Woods, during the consolidation of gold here in America. And so we had a gold-backed dollar, gold-backed currency, something that was tied to something real. Well, what happened was throughout the course of time, we ended up moving more towards oil, and you had a petrodollar. We were people who were buying and selling oil in the dollar, or were doing it in the dollar, and so that backed us up. We were able to sell military equipment to these countries, give them backup. So you had a petrodollar. Well, most recently, I believe that we're on a war dollar. We want people to transact in the dollar, and if they're not willing to transact in the dollar, we'll come in and we'll invade you, we'll liberate you, and we'll give you some democracy by force. And so we end up doing that to a lot of different countries that aren't willing to go along to get along with the debt that we give them when we come in and we tell them how to run their government. Because we fund 73% of the world's authoritarian dictatorships. This is not about liberation. This is not about democracy. This is about control. Is that too much?
It's a little much for me.
And so when you look at countries like Libya, they had a gold-backed currency. We came, we saw, he died.
Everything is so big, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we should peel it back to the
Sure.
local level. We got to control what we can control.
Mm-hmm.
And so running for local office has to be a priority.
Correct. It's all about sovereignty.
Because everybody wants to talk about Trump or Biden or whoever the
Or
president
Newsom.
is. But the fact of the matter is, the person who's making the decision of adding a new toll road to your local freeway is somebody that you could have elected.
That's right.
Or made a different choice. Same with the school board. During COVID,
That's
where
right.
everybody was going crazy and saying, "You can't do this to us," and they're like, "Yeah, we actually can because you gave us the authority
Correct.
to do so."
So I get very big in my thinking because I look at countries that tested the governments, countries like, Venezuela, deepest oil reserves in the world. People say, oh, well, their people are starving. Yeah, their people are starving because we've been performing sanctions on their government for 30 years. So, you look at this sort of stuff, and it's easy for me to look at Libya and Venezuela and Iraq and Afghanistan and Russia and, the Donbass in Ukraine and 2014 and the energy companies and all this different stuff. But really, it gets back to, Are we having our sovereignty respected here at home? Are we financially free here at home? Are our children, are they having more opportunities and a better future, better opportunities than we had when we were growing up? And I think that we can all agree that our opportunities are disappearing. The middle class is disappearing. The lower class is swelling. And so it's going to require some people getting involved to have a local revolution, one of ideas, so that we don't have a violent revolution enforced by the courts, which is what France had. Or we don't have a violent ejection of the oligarchs, which is what America had. I don't want violence in America. But what's happening right now is you have about 48% to 51% of people who are starting to look at, like the third precinct burning to the ground, and they're approving of it. They're looking at the assassination of, a healthcare CEO, and they're approving of it. Because people are looking at these things and saying, we can't vote our way out of this. And so if you don't give people a place to vote.
But you can. But you can vote your way out of it.
But you have to be involved.
It just can't be 20% of the voting population
Correct.
going to the polls.
Correct.
It has to be a larger movement, and especially it has to be millennials and Gen Z and some of Gen X who take the reins and say, we're not going to be told what to do anymore. We're not going to be told that we need to just accept this. We're going to challenge it. And hey, maybe my idea is not the best idea, or your idea is not the best idea on this particular topic, but it needs to be challenged, because we can no longer let our resources be taken by companies and groups and large conglomerates that are basically dictating not only how we live, but how much we get of the share.
Correct. And so what happens is when we get taxed by the federal government and they say, oh, well, we spend $86 billion more on the federal government than we get back. Well, I look and I say, well, that's $806 billion that never should have left in the first place. And so what's happening is a lot of that money comes back through NGOs and whatnot. And it doesn't come back on real things. And so just like you said, we don't get what we voted for if we're not voting at all.
We're already not getting what we voted for. Like you
Correct.
said, Prop 36, one thing, the water storage.
And so it's hard to get
thing.
people to get engaged, right? When the thing is when we get engaged in direct democracy and people see, oh, well, we voted for it, we didn't get it. We voted for it, we didn't get it. We voted for it, they didn't fund it.
Yeah.
Why vote? Why
get
get
it.
involved? Why run for office?
Yeah, but we need to step up, because it's going to go further and further and further away. And our kids won't even have the opportunity maybe to even vote, because it'll just be the party selecting whoever.
Correct.
And that sounds to me like communism, which
Yeah.
is
Well,
not.
I'll tell you what, brother, we both got kids that we got to pick up from school.
Yeah, we do.
And so, we wanted to get 2 episodes out for you guys. Today we talked about, the housing revolution, the deregulation, opportunities for people to get involved in the American dream. We talked about water and energy and uranium and lithium and oil and natural gas. We talked a little bit about money and the gold standard and the Federal Reserve, getting all of the things that we vote for that we don't get, whether or not we're going to be disenchanted by the process or get involved more heavily in it. And I think that both of us are coming from a place where we want you to get more heavily involved.
Yeah, let's just get involved. And, it doesn't hurt anything to actually run for office. You're actually allowed to do that.
You're actually
right?
allowed
Like
to.
David Hernandez said, well, you don't have to have a degree, or somebody doesn't have to anoint you. You can just run for office.
You don't need the ominous dominus by anybody telling you that you're good to go.
Run, and there's no shame in trying and losing, but you will shift the tide. You will create this dialogue that is missing right now, because for sure in your race and in my race, people started talking, because a lot of people know who we are now all of a sudden. When we were just I was just a community volunteer and a coach and a dad and
And I had a very similar path, but at the end of the day, we need to get off the sidelines. If you're not offering solutions, you're just complaining. And I think a lot of us, we see the problem. We've identified the problem. We know it's there.
It's the easy
What
part.
are we going to do about it?
That's the easy part, right?
Yeah.
That's the easy part. I'm thirsty, now what do? Like, let's get a drink.
Right on. Well, hey, everybody, this is another episode of the New Founders Movement. We're going to be coming to you live from the CAGOP, or maybe not live, but we're going to be coming to you from the CAGOP.
We're going to record, and if there's anybody out there who wants to run for office, I'm going to be looking for people to interview, and I am going to platform as many people as possible, because
That's right.
that was one of the major gaps that I saw was I couldn't get a press article written about me.
That's right.
I couldn't get to go on certain podcasts, because you see a lot of these podcasts out there. They talk about all these things. I'm revolutionary, and then you say, "Hey, man, can I go on your podcast?" And they go, "I might not get the guests I want to get. I don't want to upset people because you're anti-establishment." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so you're not about it."
Yeah,
so
you're
that's
not
why we started this, because
So
we're
you're
gonna
not
be
standing
about
on business. You're not 10 toes down. You're not a revolutionary. You're a hobbyist. That's what you are.
Yeah,
you
making
like
money.
to clink forks. You like to show up, get together once a month with the club to complain about it, but you don't want to be about it. God forbid we're about
That's
it.
why I say you get some of these people. They show up only for the steak, and we'll
it's not even
pretend-
steak. It's freaking chicken every time. It's chicken and rice every damn time with these
bland
things.
chicken. Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, if you're showing up, that's great. I certainly don't want to poo-poo on anyone for showing up to these damn things. It's just we have to do something once we show up. That's what we're about here at the New Founders
Action.
Movement. About action. We'll see you at the CAGOP. Come find us. We'll have a booth there. It will be my David Serpa for governor booth. But the New Founders we're going to have a presence there. We're going to be doing interviews from the booth, getting people involved, asking people to run for office. One man cannot save us. We've all got to do it together.
Let's get a group together. What do you say?
All right. Well, everybody, check me out at serpaforcalifornia.com. Find me on social media at David Serpa for California.
And I'm at Vote Romo on X, Instagram. You can find the New Founders page on Facebook. And you can also visit thenewfounders.us to find a bunch of written content. And if you want to write for us, email me and we'll get you going.
We want articles. We want content. We want people who are going to be about that life. And so if you're feeling inspired to run for office, let's go. You've got time. We'll see you at the CAGOP.
Bye now.